one of the reasons I think you are what I call the epitome of a global leader is because of your own origin story. I mean, who you are, how much you have traveled this world, how much you have engaged with cultures, people, organizations. I mean, you've seen how people in many other parts of the world handle change and uncertainty, the resilience that people bring to the table from around the world. And this book, Flux Mindset, is really something that I think has been bubbling up and stirring in you for many years. And I, for one, am grateful that it's finally coming into the world. But can we just start there and you share a little bit more of your origin story for anyone that might not know it?
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful question to start with. So if we go back, to childhood, so to speak, my dad was a cultural geographer. He was a teacher. Both my parents were teachers. And my dad studied the migratory patterns of people and plants and animals, and basically was the earliest and biggest champion of diversity that I ever knew. And, that diversity is our strength, that the more different from somebody you are, the more interesting that other person is to get to know. And so there was this insatiable curiosity, not just to know the other, but to also serve others and also get to know what you don't know and travel but see people for who they are as equals, as peers. And as an educator, I joke that we didn't have a lot growing up in terms of physical possessions, but the two things we were allowed to spend money on were education and travel. And so we traveled quite a bit as a family, but typically, hiking and camping, and my dad would research animals and that sort of thing. And then as time grew, as time went on and I got older, I started kind of flinging myself as far as I possibly could. But again, with this curiosity and this desire to get to know what makes people tick, what makes people excited, what are their values and their dreams, and just sort of this interdependence, but universality of human nature. And so that took me in quite a few directions in terms of a career in global development, in terms of 4 years spent without a permanent address, really trying to better understand how the rest of the world lived, which took me to a lot of different emerging markets, developing countries, and so forth. But I will mention that prior to that happening, and really part of my own genesis story, I mentioned my dad, who was also my best friend and sort of my champion and everything. When I was in college, both of my parents actually died in a car accident. And that thrust me into a world in flux. Whatever I thought my future was going to be, it melted. And I know that might be a little bit shocking to share right off the bat here. I want to make everyone sure and comfortable that I love talking about my parents, but also what that experience taught me about our ability to control or not the future, about our fundamental human relationships and those being the ties that keep us together even when great change hits, and a really, hopeful, uplifting message for the future. So I do joke that Flux, this book, it was the better part of 2.5 years to write, but it really was the better part of 2.5 decades in the making. When I look at how long I've been just peeling back the layers of the onion around how we grapple with change. You might have heard a lot of times we love certain kinds of change. We love the change we get to opt into, but we really struggle with being changed. And we struggle with the kinds of change we don't control. And I think this past year, we've all had an extra dose of that. But what I'm really interested in is last year was traumatic in many ways, but it wasn't necessarily that different than the kinds of change, the seismic changes that we're facing individually, organizationally, societally, and they're going to be more common moving forward. And so when it comes to this flux mindset, now is the time we all need to be developing it, because last year was a wake-up call, but there's a lot more of this kind of never-ending, constant, relentless change ahead.